Hi, everybody, and welcome to the very special episode of the Endless Celts Podcast, a Sunday live, which is a first for us. But we're delighted to be joined by Japanese journalist Dan Orlowitz. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Let me be the first to say congratulations. Big week for you guys.
Big week, big season, which we're going to talk about shortly. But I do want to say to you, as I said to you before we came on earlier, you've fairly done your rounds in the start of the season with the Celtic podcast. So I appreciate you coming back on to kind of talk about the close season and Ange Postecoglou's short tenure at Celtic Football Club as it stands at the minute. But we'll get stuck right in. And we'll start with the main man, Postecoglou himself. And I'll come to you with a quick fire question. You can elaborate if you want. Are you surprised by his success in his first season?
I think in the context of the first season, a little surprising, if only because it happened so quickly. As he said after Wednesday's result, it was 2 seasons in one. It was the rebuilding season, and then it was the title season. And so I think we all of us who advocated for Ange I said it's going to be rough. There's going to be some rebuilding time. It's going to be a process, and that Celtic fans have to trust in it. And everyone told me, no, we don't have the patience for that. The title of the first season or it's a failure. And hey, you got the title of the first season. And in that sense, I think that it is easy to get taken aback. If you're looking back on in retrospect, yes, he did exactly what we expected him to do, but it did require all the pieces to fall into place exactly as they had to, and there is always a bit of a surprise element to that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I kind of what you said there about the league title. Usually for me, that's the marker of success. I agree with it. Anything before that, it's kind of a failure, regardless of what you win. League title, Celtic need to be back on top, especially this season with the Champions League bounty, the £40 million at stake as well. And Postecoglou fairly delivering that with a fantastic team. But if we jump in like the time machine and go back to the start of the season, I was kind of guilty of this myself. I remember when Postecoglou was being mentioned after Eddie Howe kind of fell through and everyone had their breakdown about that. And then Postecoglou came along and it was quite quick how it happened. It was like a rumor and then it just gathered and gathered and gathered. Me, myself, personally, I was like, who is this guy? You look into his credentials and yes, he's done well in Japan, Australia, but you do that ignorant thing, Dan. I don't know if you've came across it many times, but you kind of compare leagues and you're going, if he's done well there, why hasn't no other club took an opportunity on him? You're questioning things. I know he was linked with Sunderland before, but it kind of fell through. But if you kind of go back to when he was first announced, what's the major difference now? Because in the Celtic family, Ange Postecoglou is one of our own. He's loved.
Uh, I think that there were let's get it out of the way. There were a lot of really bad takes about Postecoglou as soon as he came up, and I do think a lot of it, as you say, sort of came from ignorance about the leagues that he had coached in. I don't think that there is a great understanding of Asian football in Scotland, and that's not your fault. I'm not saying it is, but I think that I hope, if nothing else, that this season has taught everyone to keep a very open mind about the football that's happening beyond Scotland, beyond the UK, beyond Europe, because as you can see, we're developing some incredible coaches and some incredible players. I think that all of us who were coming on to podcasts and Sky and BBC and all the shows back in the early days, we did see it in a way as defending what we believe to be Asian football's potential and our talent. But we also knew from experience that Ange was the boss. We were confident that he was going to get it done because we've seen it happen. We saw it happen in Yokohama. We saw it happen in the A-League. We saw it happen for Australia in the Asian Cup. And so I think we're all coming from this place where we know the level of play because we're not just seeing Asian leagues. We do watch the Premiership, the Premier League. We know the level of play in Europe. And so we knew that not if, but when Ange got his chance, that he would perform up to the standard that we expect from him. We expected him to succeed in Europe. Did we expect him to get the title in the first year? I think if you're asking me back in December, am I satisfied with his progress? I think the League Cup and finishing a close second would have been a great result for his first season. I think if you're asking us for that bet, most would have taken it if you'd said, are we
Yeah.
going to settle for those results? And then January came, and then they made the signings that they needed to make, and Hatate scores 2 against Rangers, and it's a whole new league.
We'll be getting on to them players shortly. What superstars some of them are going to go on to be, and I know, Dan, there will be a few sore heads in the comments after the celebrations that was seen yesterday. The wild celebrations in Glasgow, which looked fantastic, at Celtic Park was fantastic, and I just want to welcome you all along this Sunday morning. I know it's kind of a shock that we're on live, but hey ho, it's going to be a great show. And I want to look at his time at Yokohama in Japan and the perception of him there, because he gets called the boss, right? You see that kind of stature about him. See, when he went into the J League, was it like a shock to the system when he went there? Was it like did the standard change while he was there involved? Did you see that?
I think that especially at Yokohama, the standard changed. That the standard went up, and you could even see it in terms of how the players responded, in terms of how the club coalesced around him, in terms of how you talk to many members of the media that cover the J League, and they'll all say that Postecoglou is one of the best managers they've ever seen come here, and that's a pretty high standard. This is a league we've had Arsene Wenger. We've had a number of European coaches come and go. We've had a number of great Brazilian coaches come and go. We've had Zico coach the national team here. We've had coaches come and win trebles, win the Champions League, but Ange wasn't just a sort of mercenary coach or a journeyman or just sort of a coach you could pop into any squad, and he would win the title. He was building his system. He was building his house brick by brick, establishing his philosophy, establishing his attacking style. And that is why you saw at Yokohama, there was inconsistency, because the players weren't always ready to play what he was asking of them. And that's what you saw in some of those results in that first season, where they win by a gigantic score and then they come back and they lose 4-3 the next week. And part of that was you have goalkeepers, you have defenders who just aren't ready to press aggressively. You don't have a goalkeeper who was confident in his ability to basically play as a sweeper. And you saw the changes that they made during the off season between the 2020 and 2021 seasons. And that's what made the difference, or excuse me, not way back, the 2018 and 2019 seasons. And that's what made the difference in winning that title in 2019, was the players that he brought on who were able to adapt to his system and to do what he wanted them to do. And they all trusted him. And I think that when if a player calls you boss, that can be an affectation, nickname, whatever. But when you accept that mantle as a manager, you're accepting the responsibility. You are saying that, listen, I'm the boss, and what happens on the pitch, it falls to me, win or lose. And I think that it does take a certain amount of confidence to do that. And is nothing if not confident.
Oh, he's definitely confident. What I love about him as well, Dan, like his system, as you said there, he builds it brick by brick, and that the term thrown around that we never stop is on back of t-shirts and everything, so they're making good money out of that. But you look at it, his system, Joe Hart, that sweeper keeper, gives you a heart attack sometimes, and you talk about the inconsistencies. We've seen that at the start of the season. Pre-season, we got smashed up by West Ham, like 6-2, whatever it was. We lost our first 3 out of 6 league games, and you could kind of see not the whole support, but some of the support getting on his back and kind of asking questions. Is this guy going to make it? And it's all in hindsight now, obviously, but you have to go through these things. And you tend to talk about the media, and the media over here have been quite, I would say, not disrespectful to a degree towards Ange Postecoglou. I mean, there's that famous TalkSport presenter, Alan Brazil. I don't know if you've seen that clip going about, and he's like, Posta who and all that stuff, and he kind of got made to eat a humble pie. But what was Postecoglou like with the media over in Japan? Is he still the same, or has he changed his approach?
He's the same, and just very straightforward. You can't ask him a dumb question, or he'll or he'll hit you for it. And I've done it. Not that I'd like to hope I didn't ask him any dumb questions while he was at Marinos, but sometimes you lob him a softball and he knows you're giving him a softball, and he is gracious enough to usually respond in kind. But I think that the biggest difference, and this is something that he's talked about over there, is that now he isn't going through an interpreter anymore, and I think that does make a ton of difference when you're talking not just to the players but to the media, because there is a certain gruffness to his demeanor. I say that with all the love and affection in the world, but it does get lost in translation a little. And when you're an interpreter in Japan, you do have to couch things and quantify them a little and sort of soften them. Because if you say what the manager is really saying in whatever language he's saying it is sometimes the club gets a fine. So there's a very fine line there. And I think that he's been right at home in Scotland. You look at his performance in the press conferences, which is sometimes more entertaining than what you see on the pitch, and he loves a fight. You know, I think he loves a fight, and he loves to be a fighter up there. And I think that the fans love a fighter, and I think that's helped to endear him to Celtic's fandom.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like a big bird, doesn't he? He just has that kind of the physique about him, like you don't want to cross him. And then you seen the emotional side of him yesterday when he was doing the aftermath celebrations, pictures of his 2 kids and his wife, and he did the speech to the Celtic fans. I thought he was going to cry. I was nearly crying myself. It was just so emotional yesterday. I think you're 100% right. We do love a fighter. Do you know what I mean? But we needed someone to come in and galvanise the club again and bring this back to the top, because I know when you were doing your rounds in the Celtic podcast before, some of the things you said were taken to the extreme or whatever, in terms of you'd rather draw a game, blah, blah, blah. But when you look back on it now and the progress that he's made, coming from Yokohama, Japan to the Celtic Football Club, with all due respect, a far bigger institution in Yokohama. But do you think he's coped with that demand well? Because as we spoke about before, that pressure that he felt at the start of the season, he just kind of wiped it off. It didn't bother him. Did you get that kind of sense?
I don't think that. I mean, again, I said at the time that it isn't sort of that he'd rather settle for a draw than lose or then win narrowly. It's that he has such an uncompromising belief in the kind of football that he wants to play that he can, when he wants to, just turn on that tunnel vision and focus on that. And I think that he's very good at just pushing away the distractions, turning down the noise, and he doesn't worry about the fishbowl. He doesn't worry about what the media are saying. I think he's just worried about what his players are doing on the training ground and on game day, and that's definitely helped him, because I think you do need an incredibly thick skin to get through that league. It is absolutely way beyond anything he's ever dealt with, and even in Australia, where the media have at times been just as critical of him. In Japan, he didn't really have to deal with that criticism, and that's a problem with Japanese media and less with him. But there was a question of sort of, has Japan made him go soft? And I don't think it was never in doubt that he was just the same Ange that he always was. It's just that now he had this fire to forge himself in, and I think he handled it brilliantly.
Yeah, I think one of the most striking things was that he said it was like his burning ambition to make a mark at a world-renowned club in Europe, and he's done that with Celtic Football Club. And what I love about him, he always kind of talks about his father, and he was speaking about him yesterday, saying he's probably watching somewhere, and it makes you emotional that he's still holding on to them memories, because he always wanted to impress his father and get bums off seats, which is what he always talks about. And you look at it, he's won the league, he's clinched the league, he's done the double in his first season. It's absolutely fantastic. Have a wee bit back in the time machine. We'll come to now. Let's talk about Europe a wee bit. And I know in the Asia Champions League, there was his aspiration to do well. Do you think impact on Europe is his main aim at Celtic Football Club?
Absolutely. Look, it doesn't get bigger for club. Well, okay, we're going to put aside the argument about the Club World Cup's place in the football landscape. I will defend that for him.
Do you compare that? Do you compare that?
We rate the Club World Cup because we hosted it so many times, and honestly, I think that European clubs should rate it more than they do, because I think it should matter. But again, I'm not here to talk about the Club World Cup. We're here to talk about Ange and the boys.
Yeah.
I think that if you're a club manager, which he is, and which he loves being, he could have, if he had been offered the Japan job, which there were some rumors and discussions about whether or not he should be. I'm not sure he would have taken it, because he said that he loves working with the players on a day-to-day basis. And if you're that kind of manager, I think that the Champions League, it's such an iconic competition. It's such a strong tournament. It is, in terms of level, as big as it gets. And I think that you'd be insane to not want to compete in the Champions League and not want to try to win it. And I'm not making any promises about what he's going to be able to do, but I'll tell you, if there is a manager in Asia who is capable of going deep into the Champions League, it is Ange Postecoglou. I think he is the best manager in the continent right now. It's way too early to say how Celtic are going to do in the competition coming up, but he's going to give it his all. And I think that as far as not being able to succeed in Asia, it is a very differently difficult continental competition than the European Champions League, for a lot of different reasons. You have the refereeing standards, you have the standards of facilities, which vary widely. The travel is incredibly intense. You can have to play a game in Yokohama on Saturday, fly to Australia, play a game on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then fly back for a Saturday or Sunday game.
Yeah.
That's not
so easy.
That's an 8-hour flight. And only across 1 or 2 time zones. It's not easy. It's a brutal continent to play in, and to have to balance the continental and domestic competition. So I don't think that his failure to win the ACL should be held against him. It's just not an easy competition to win. And in that sense, winning the Asian Champions League is in some ways harder than the UEFA Champions League, just because you're not, it's the equivalent of having to fly from London to not even Moscow, I think beyond, every other week. In some cases.
That's insane. Like, if you look at it as well, I mean, if you go by his results in European football this season already in Europa League, he went for it against every team, whether it was Leverkusen or Betis. And I think that goes back to the point that you made at the start of the show, when his belief, he's never going to waver from it. He's never going to change it. I know people always say, and this is actually a point I want to put to you, it's been a lot of is there a plan B? Is it do plan A better? And you look at it into European football, and I thought you made a fantastic point in terms of Asian coaches that I know are more of he's the best, because again, I'm kind of not ignorant of the whole Japanese manager stuff. I just don't know many of them. Postecoglou's the one who sticks to mind for me. But you look at it into European football, do you think he needs a kind of tweak to the system, or like your own personal opinion, or is it does Ange ball all the way?
I think that Ange ball will at times need to evolve, but I think the fundamentals of Ange ball are going to remain the same. And I think that it isn't so much about tweaking the system or different formations as it is about getting the players to work even better under that system, getting the players rested. I think you had a lot of players who performed very well given the circumstances during the second half of the season, but they need to rest. Daisen Maeda needs to rest. Reo Hatate needs some time off. You have Rajic and Near and all these players, Near Biton, and all these players who need to be replaced. And you've got, fortunately, the whole summer to go into that system and to figure out what your needs are in the transfer market and get them settled and get them integrated. And he talked about how quickly he wants to get that done. I think he said he wants to finish up his business before the preseason.
Yep.
And if you can do that, if you have the whole preseason to work on that, Champions League starts in early September for the group stage.
Yeah, group stage.
That's plenty of time to get ready. I think it's going to be very challenging for Celtic. I think you're going to be in pot 3 or 4. So no matter what, you're going to be paired up with 2 very strong clubs. 3, really. I don't think it matters.
Yeah, realistically,
it doesn't matter who you draw in the Champions League. They're going to be tough games, all of them.
Yeah,
But
100%.
and it is going to be it's going to be a new challenge for him. But I think now that he has played in the Europa League, in the Conference League, he does know what European travel is like. He understands the circumstances, the pressure that the players are going to be under, and I think he's going to respond to that.
Yeah, 100%. I think you made a great point, Dan, in terms of the pre-season, because usually Celtic are 2 weeks off and they're straight back in. They're playing pre-season friendlies for like the first qualifying round, and for me that was absolutely disgraceful that a champion of Scotland would be in the. But thankfully the coefficient were in the group stages. I want to address some of the comments here because I feel like I've been leaving some of them out. But Ryan Kelly comes in and just slowly becoming my favourite Celtic manager so far. His speech got me most yesterday. Looking forward to see how he progresses next season. 100%. Egyptian King, he wants to know if there's any more gems we can get from the J League. We're going to come on to that, Egyptian King, very shortly. Again, I just want to welcome everyone along. Lanky 67's in, Stevie Boy's in, Ryan Kelly. So it's great to have you along on this Sunday morning. But you look at Ange coming in, right? You look at players he signed. We'll start with the first one that came from the J League, and that was Kyogo. A fantastic, fantastic player. This guy, the 2 goals he got yesterday, especially the second one, was phenomenal. Come over the shoulder in the volley, just one touch, bang into the back of the net. But before I get into that, can you tell me, Dan, how no one picked this guy up before?
We knew he's been here the whole time. I mean, it's. I think that Vissel Kobe were smart, and this is Kyogo is currently, if I'm looking at all of the Japanese players who have gone to Europe and all of the J League clubs that have let them go for next to nothing, I think that Kyogo goes down as one of the best bits of business that a Japanese club has done. Probably one of the top 5 sales, maybe not in terms of pure monetary value, but in terms of getting what they deserved for a Japanese player. He came out of university, he played at FC Gifu, then Vissel signed him very smartly, and the goal was always going to be, I think that they knew that he was a quality player who was going to go to Europe. Nobody was ever in doubt of that. Kyogo Furuhashi was not a surprise to anyone, but what Vissel did, which was the really smart thing, is that they basically had him shadowing and interning under Andres Iniesta for a couple of seasons, and that will get you very far. I think that they saw that this was a chance for them to take one of Japan's most promising strikers and have him learn under the master.
Yep.
And he did that, and I think that this was something I touched on when Kyogo's transfer happened, how Iniesta was just unabashedly endorsing him. And to get an endorsement like that is a huge thing, and I think it gave everyone a bit of confidence. So it was always going to happen. I think that it's just very fortunate for him and for the club that it happened the way it did.
Yeah, I think as well it helped Ange Postecoglou, in my opinion, because he's bringing in that kind of. Although he didn't coach him, but he knew of him and he knew he was going to be a cracking player. It was his chance to show him recruiting is the best process for Celtic Football Club, and we're going to touch upon that as well. But with Kyogo, and you're 100% correct, you can tell by his movement all the time that Iniesta was just pinging balls to him left, right, and centre. He makes them darting runs, and just let's touch upon some of his goals that he scored for Celtic in the cup final, especially, and yesterday with that volley. Do you think that Kyogo will be? And I don't want to get any Celtic fans on my back here, but it's a question I want to ask. But do you think that Kyogo will be settled at Celtic for the foreseeable years, or do you think he's aiming for somewhere else? I mean, he is a quality player.
I think that I don't have, we're not close personal friends. I'm not on first name terms with him. So, again, this is sort of common sense conjecture, but I think that all Japanese players are always aiming higher. You're always aiming to play for a bigger club in a bigger league, under brighter lights. And I think that, for example, if one of the big 4 Premier League clubs comes and makes him an offer he can't refuse, of course he'd be foolish not to take it away. But I think that his management are smart enough. I think he's smart enough to know what a good situation to go into is and what a bad situation to go into is. You look at Shinji Kagawa, who went, he was a legend at Dortmund, but he chased the Premier League. Yep. He went to Manchester United. I think that, again, that's an example of a club so big you can't turn it down. But unfortunately for him, he ended up in just what wasn't a great situation, because you had Sir Alex retiring after a season, and things didn't really work out for United after that. So for Kyogo, if Arsenal come to you, if Tottenham come to you, if Man City, maybe even Man City, just because of the relationship they have with Celtic, yeah, I think it could happen. Will it happen this summer? Probably not. Will it happen next summer? I mean, that depends on how many goals he scores in the Champions League. Really, I think that Kyogo's future is up to him at this point.
Yeah, I think Kyogo as well. Like you look at his movement, and within the guys in the podcast, we always said, bar Henrik Larsson, in terms of movement, he's miles ahead of the rest. You can see when he's on the pitch, defenders are scared to close him. They're scared to back off him because he comes deep and he can make that dart and run in behind. It's also quick. It's like his brain's always ticking. It's always thinking of where to be. And I think the goals yesterday were kind of exemplary of that. I mean, Ralston plays a lovely ball over the top, and he just watches the ball instead of watching the keeper. He didn't care, and he just bangs it in the top corner. He's a fantastic player. And you look at the injuries, right? Bar the injuries, I think it was, what was it, 16 starts in the SPFL and for 12 goals or 13 goals. That's fantastic. And obviously, I think it's 19 goals for overall for the season. But bar injury next season, and another one I'm going to throw in, Giacomakis, because the comments is going crazy for this. Who do you think is going to score the most?
Oh God, I'd like to see Kyogo score the most. I'd like to see him hit 20. I think that if he's healthy, he's capable of it. The fact that he was nearly joint top scorer in the Premiership with missing 18 games, something like that. I mean, it's a player like Kyogo only works he's in a way only as good as the players around him, and I mean that in a good way, because if you saw that when he was at Vissel Kobe, and when it's him and Iniesta's fit and playing, they can cause trouble for any team. But when you don't have that sort of those sorts of players surrounding you, that's when you are a bit isolated and it gets frustrating. But Kyogo just has such a talented array of players around him, and they are all clearly so comfortable with each other that they know how to work with each other. You're going to be creating magic every weekend. And I remember being asked, well, can Maida and Kyogo play, can they play together? And I think you saw that yesterday. I think Maida assisted Kyogo's first. So there's your answer. I think they can play great together. And if they keep doing it, then yeah, I think that Kyogo can get 20. I think that he absolutely has a shot at the Golden Boot. He can do anything he wants to, basically. It's just a question of whether or not he can stay healthy and deliver.
I think as well, like once they get onto this first season, I know that usually when I heard you speak before, it's the second season where Ange's team's really boom, 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 boom. And hopefully that's still the same effect with Celtic, regardless that he's just won the title and the cup double for ourselves. But one player I want to touch upon again, is he's getting brought up in the comments here, is, now, forgive me for my pronunciation, I'm well known for messing names up. Ideguchi, is that?
You're not Ideguchi, Yosuke Ideguchi, you've got it. Great.
Ideguchi, right? So we're seeing Beaton leaving, right? And he's our defensive midfielder. Ideguchi came in for one game and got injured, but he came on yesterday. He looked very well, played the ball simple. He can break forward as well. What can we expect from him in the long run?
I think that he's got a lot of potential. I mean, he was done dirty by his injury. It can't be helped. I think Ange recognizes how important he's going to be, not just as a core player, not just in the sense of the team needs depth for the Champions League, but in terms of the first team. I think that it will be possible to see 3 or 4 Japanese players starting regularly for Celtic. It can absolutely happen. He brings this aggression to the midfield. I think that he presses really well. He will force turnovers, and he can push up and contribute to the attack and distribute balls as you need. So I think that he is the perfect complement to players like Maida, like Ideguchi, like Gigi over there. And it's you've got so much potential. And I think that this is, if you look at the players that Ange has assembled, it isn't just that they each do something. It isn't that just that they each do something well. It's that they each do so many things well with each other. And so they can just connect however they need to. It's like the Transformer toys that we had as kids. They can sort of twist and turn into whatever shape you need, and then shoot a missile down your throat. It's just so many threats in the Celtic squad.
Do you think that Ideguchi will be a starter going forward? Because I know at the minute he prefers Kalmack and I was going to say Rozic, but he's left. I don't want to start crying again. And then O'Reilly or Hatate. But do you think you can see maybe Ideguchi, Kalmack, and Hatate in the midfield going forward?
I think that it's gonna depend a lot on the kind of game and the kind of opposition that Celtic are facing. I think if you want an aggressive attack from the opening whistle, that's when maybe you start Hatate. But if you know that you do have to be a bit more defensive and prepare for an early push from the opposition, then maybe you put in Ideguchi. I think that you can go either way.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll move on to the Duracell bunny. That's Dyson Maeda. And this guy, now, before I get into him, he came into Celtic, and a lot of people in the first couple of games are saying he doesn't look quite at it. But since that, he's been bang on it from the left. And I always thought the left was his best position. When he plays in the middle, not that he doesn't look as good, but he doesn't make the same movements as Kyogo does. Maeda just runs up and down that left-hand side. And him and Greg Taylor, I know there's a lot of people who don't rate him. Me personally, I'm 50-50 on that. But they do have a good partnership. And I've seen when he joined Celtic, he had the most sprints in the J League, or the most closing down at reception and stuff, and you can fairly see that. But Maeda next season, are we going to see a totally different player, even better after a rest?
He's going to be even better after that rest. Absolutely. I mean, I get tired watching him. You see him. I forget the exact stat of the 2021 season where I think he had something like 15 or 16 of the top 20 sprints in the J League that year.
Yeah.
And he just, where he gets this energy from, I don't know. He should give some of it to Hatate, who's needed it a bit this season. But just, I think that he's, as I sort of said at the time of his signing, he's a player who can score and does score. But more importantly, he's a player who will pressure. You talk about Ideguchi pressuring. I think Maeda is not
the king.
Just if you're looking at what he's contributing to the attack in terms of the pressure he creates and the stress he creates for defenders and the room that he creates for other attackers to do their thing, it's incredible. And so I think that you're going to see a lot more of that. I think that he's adjusting to the pace. He understands. I think he can feel very confident after this season. Get some rest. He's going to get some more experience for the national team next month, most likely. And he's going to come back and just be shinier and bolder than ever. And I think that, it's you look at what he's done with the chances he's had this season. And now he gets to do that in the Champions League. There's I think that it's going to be such a motivating competition for these players to have the chance to do what they've done in Paris, in Barcelona, in Rome, wherever they get drawn in, and that's such a huge occasion.
I think one of his coaches, it's a Hutchison. One of his coaches said that he is like a machine. He's probably up there with Mbappe in terms of speed, and if he comes back like that, then we're all happy. And Egyptian King comes in here for a great point. I heard you talk about this before. 2 million for Maeda is an absolute steal. Is transfer fees in Japan something being discussed? Because for me, they seem. Now, I don't want to jinx it. I'm going to touch a wee bit of wood here, but they seem really low for these quality players.
They are, and this is. There's a few different issues, and I'm not going to get too in the weeds on this, but it has to do with the fact that clubs generally aren't signing players to pro contracts from when they're teenagers, like you would in Europe. When you turn 18, when you get out of high school, that's when you're old enough to get signed, and a lot of the time, these young players will get signed to pro C or B contracts, and then you eventually get up to a pro A when you have enough minutes, when you've made enough appearances. And the problem that Japan has, that so many of these players, they want to go to Europe. That's the goal. And so a talented player like Furuhashi, for example, his agent can say, well, he wants to go to Europe, and he's good enough to go to Europe by the time he turns 23, 24, maybe even 22.
Mm-hmm.
Do they want a club that is going to hold on to him and charge a big transfer fee, or do they want a club who, when they get an offer from Europe, is going to say, thank you and good luck?
Yeah,
So the preference is always going to be for a club that will offer that easier pathway to Europe. And that's how some of the smaller clubs even have managed to get good players for as long as they have, by saying that, listen, we're not going to pay you $1 million a year. Sorry, £1 million a year. Pounds, euros? What's it?
pounds.
Pounds. Look, the exchange rate's horrible no matter where you go. It doesn't. We're not going to give you £1 million a year. But when a European club comes calling, we're not going to put up too much of a fight, and that's appealing to the young players who
Yeah,
want to be able to build themselves and establish themselves. And £2 million for Maida, that it's big by J League standards,
yeah.
but it is, as we've seen, very, very much undervaluing what these players
Oh
are
yeah,
worth. And this is something that the J League is conscious about, because they are aware that without changing things, without changing how transfers are handled, especially overseas, the clubs aren't going to get the money that they need to replenish the stocks, to sign new players, to invest in the academy and develop
yeah,
more players. And so the question is, how do you fix that? And it does require a massive overhaul of how agents work with clubs, how clubs are structuring contracts, and how the JFA is treating high schoolers and university players and amateur players for when they go pro. So it's going to be a while before they sort it all out. And this is something that the league wanted to do these last 2 years, but you had the pandemic and they had more important things to worry about.
yeah. It's. I mean, it boils down to an agreement, really, doesn't it, with the player and the club? And I think that's, although the transfer fees are low, but it is quite respectful to the clubs that allow it to happen. And you can see the kind of in the Japanese players that we have, the humbleness about them all, the bowing going off the pitch, and they're just so respectful. And I like that kind of attitude. I don't know, I mean, I like that vibe. And we'll kind of round it off with Riho Hatate here, of the Japanese contingent. And you made a great point. Can Maeda transfer some of that energy to him, because he looked absolutely busted the last couple of games he's played. He came in running off adrenaline. He played a cracking game against Rangers, scored 2 goals. He can pass the ball. He can dribble with the ball. Just at the moment, I'm not obviously saying anything about. I think he's a fantastic player, but can we expect a better level of Atate next season when he comes back?
I think that it's the fact that he got this last game off, is a sign. Look, he needs a rest. I don't think that he would have taken that as an insult by not being in the squad. I think that he has more than earned his place in the squad and as a starter. I think that what these Japanese players, thank you for that comment, by the way. What these Japanese players all have in common is that you can start them, you can bring them off the bench, and either way, they're going to always put 100% into their game. They're not scrolling onto the pitch. They're not holding it back for smaller opponents or whatever. And I think Hatate put a lot on himself. I think he that in his diary for Sportiva that I translated the other week, and he talked about the sort of how tired he was. When you're in training and seeing 2 balls, that's not a great sign. But and that goes to what I talked about earlier, just the travel to and from Asia. And I think that now he understands how to approach things better, hopefully.
Yep.
I think that now he knows, maybe he has a better understanding of what he needs to do nutrition-wise, what he needs to do just for fitness and for recovery. And he might try out some new gadgets this summer, take yoga, or whatever he needs to do. I'm sure that Celtic will help figure it out for him, because he, as I said, when the 3 players were signed in the winter window, Hatate in a way has a higher ceiling than any of these 4.
Yeah.
I think he has the most potential to grow, and he will just be absolutely scary when he's playing at 100% every weekend. But he just, not all players can deal with that. I think that he even in the games where he wasn't 100%, as I think you agree, he showed his talent, he showed his
Yeah.
potential. But there's only so much you can do for so long before you're running out of breath. And you're seeing that in the 50, 60-minute mark. So we'll see how he does this summer. I'm in no way concerned about his ability to get ready for the next season and be ready with all cylinders firing.
See, a quick one on the diary. Again, this caused a lot of misinterpretation in Scottish newspapers in general. Kind of murmurings that some of the things he said points to that he's unsettled and he's fatigued and he's missing home. But to go back to you on that point, is that something that Japanese players do a lot? They do these diary things, and especially when they're traveling overseas. Is that something we can expect in the future?
I mean, I wouldn't say that he was sort of home. I wouldn't say it was missing home. I think that all the Japanese players miss home to some
Yeah,
extent.
well,
But like I wouldn't describe it as homesick. I think that it is. Scotland is as far away from Japan as you can get in a lot of ways, just in terms of the culture, the food, the training environment, the fans, and I think some of those are positive changes, but it is an adjustment. When you're a Japanese player and you're used to speaking Japanese 24/7, and then you are dropped into an environment where you're hearing nothing but English, and a lot of your interactions are going through an interpreter, that's a really stressful thing.
yeah,
I don't think you should. I don't think the fans should read into it. I think that not every player does these sort of diaries or these sort of long media things. I don't know if this was him writing it on himself or more likely him talking to a journalist who sort of ghost writes it and that sort of thing,
yeah,
which is very common here. I mean, what he wrote, I don't think isn't made up, because again, with Japanese players, these things do tend to go through several levels, and their agents check it and their management team checks it. And I think that he was genuine, and I think there's just part of it. I think that if anything, he should be respected for the honesty, because
mm,
it does take a lot. I think that players, especially at that high elite level, there is so much pressure to always be on,
yeah,
to not look like you're struggling. And so for him to come out and say, listen, this is tough, I think it's a very brave thing to do, and I think it's a very honest thing to do. And so I think that you saw that the reaction wasn't, well, he can't cut it. The reaction wasn't that we can't handle it, but what can we do to give him the environment he needs to be better? And that's why so many fans were in my mention saying, well, we have to bench him, we have to give him some time. And in the end, he wasn't really benched. He just kept going, and I think he
yeah.
managed it. But Ange is no fool. I think he knows where his players are at, and if he thinks that a player needs to be rested, he'll rest the player. And so I think that in that sense, Ange trusts his players. The players trust Ange, and I think Ange trusts the players to trust him.
Yeah.
And so I think if Hatate was really in a position where he couldn't play or he didn't feel like he could, he's going to say something. And I think that that's a very good environment that they have where they're in a position to do that.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the brilliant things that Anne said, I don't know if you've seen it, he said about Hatate when this was all being questioned, saying he needs to get used to the Scottish pace of football.
Mm-hmm.
So he's basically playing to get used to that kind of pace, which again is in a way dealing with it, do you know what I mean? Because he's going to be chasing that next season, plus the Champions League football, then the cup competitions as well. So hopefully it all bodes well for the Japanese contingent will have a Celtic Football Club. But just to round it off, that brings us in nicely, Anthony Dunn. Question for Dan Stephen: are there many other hidden gems in the J League that he believes could end up at Celtic next season? Big fan of your work, so you
I
fire on,
appreciate
Dan.
it.
Who we
Thank you.
thinking?
I mean, I'm gonna say I don't think there are going to be too many undiscovered gems in the J League, because I think that because of the interest and because of what you've been able to see from Japanese players now, I'm very thankful that there's so much interest in the J League. And I know that right now the UK doesn't have a J League broadcaster, so call up your broadcaster of choice, your streamer of choice, and I think OneFootball or whatever it is, and just tell them that you want to see the J League. Hit up the J League's English Twitter account. I think it's going to be much harder for Celtic to discover those sort of gems. I think that a lot of the diamonds are coming out of the rough. I'm not sure you need it, to be honest. I think that, we sort of joke and meme about, oh, well, Celtics should just start 11 Japanese players. Not that I don't think you want that, but like, do you need it? I think that you have four very strong talents, three of whom have a very good shot of representing Japan in the World Cup in a few months. I think that if you're going to keep looking for Japanese players, it sort of disrupts the energy in the room a bit. You don't want to go all
Very
in.
good point.
I think that isn't the new signings from Iran? He's Iranian. Was that?
But he's not confirmed. Postecoglou actually said he never heard of him before. So
Oh, okay. Well,
we don't know that.
Yeah. Look, Ange. If there's someone I want to play at poker, it's Ange Postecoglou. But I think that he's going to be looking not just in Japan but elsewhere in Asia, and I think that he is very aware of what the Asian market is, and I don't think you need to go to Japan, because I think that for one, it's like I tweeted the other day, it's Chinese buffet rules are in effect. I think you don't get to go back, and you don't get to go back for more until you've used the players that you have, and I think that Itaguchi deserves his shot, and I think he'll get it. If you're looking at players who can fit your needs, I think defensively, if I'm looking at Japanese players, you're going to have to get out the checkbooks, but I would look at the players who are in Europe and proving themselves. You look at Wataru Endo at Stuttgart, who just saved the team from relegation with an incredible goal. Hiroki Ito, who's there at the same club on loan from Jubilee Iwata, and he's 19, but he's, I believe, started in most of their games this season, and for him to make an impact there at such a young age is commendable. And I think there's something like 50 or 60 Japanese players in European first division teams right now, either on loan or there permanently. And so I think you can look at those, and in those cases, you're getting players who have already experienced European football to some extent, and they're adjusted to it, and they are.
I think in reality, Dan, what you're saying is Celtic leave the J League alone.
Look, Celtic, I mean, don't come to the J League, but just bring a bit more than £2 million. I will give you. I think that arguably the J League's best striker at the moment is Yuma Suzuki, who's with Kashima Antlers, and he was in Belgium for a bit, and it didn't really work out for him there. But his coach at St. Troyden at the time, Kevin Muscat, who inherited Ange's seat at Yokohama, speaks very highly of Yuma Suzuki. And one of the most frustrating points of contention for those of us who follow the Japanese game is, why hasn't Suzuki been called up for the national team? The answer to that goes into sort of, he's had some issues with the head coach, Hajime Moriyasu, and there's some friction there. But the reality is that he's one of the best Japanese attackers who's playing right now, and I'd put him up there with Kyogo. I'd put him up there with Yuya Osako, who's unfortunately going to keep getting call-ups, and he, you look at those players, and I think that he can. Do you need him, though? Is the question. Do you need another Japanese striker? I feel like, again, you have to look at midfield and at your back line. And the other thing is that, do you necessarily want players who are question marks? Do you want to go for a young talent, especially when you're heading into the Champions League? And that's the other reason that I would say that you look at Europe, because you can get great Asian players, you can get great Korean players and Japanese players who are in Europe and who are aware of the level of play, and you're not going to be looking at them 15 minutes before you take on Barcelona or Real Madrid and asking if they're up to the task.
Yeah, I 100% agree with yourself. I think sometimes, as you rightly said, that the Chinese buffet comment was quite funny, but it kind of comes into effect. I mean, you don't want too many. I mean, it's not a bad thing. We have 4 Japanese players already. We still need to keep kind of a Scottish core. And then, as I think you're right, the whole European market, we should be looking at that. And some people in the comments are suggesting South America and South Korea, which Ange Postecoglou said himself that he wants to tap into in the future, and also Iran. but he said he didn't know who that player was, so don't know where that's going. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, if you're comparing, especially Japanese and Korean players, I think that I would always say that Japanese players are, in a way, better agility and technique, but Korean
Yeah.
players are going to be more physically ready, and they can handle rougher play. And I think that they are, in many ways, a good fit for the Scottish League. This is part of why Japanese clubs have struggled so much in the Champions League, which is that you're always playing these Korean and Chinese clubs who are very physically rough on the pitch. And we call it, this is derogatory, but it's always sort of taekwondo soccer, or judo football, and it is that sort of, when you're a Japanese club and you're lined up against a K-League club in the Champions League, you have to be ready for war. And so I don't think that there's a better place to look for those physically talented players who can get into a scrap if they need to, than the K-League, than some of these Korean players in Europe. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I take it as well in Japan, Dan, that the Celtic supporters kind of went through the roof. The Celtic Japan Twitter has like over 50,000 followers. Then added to the fact that Japanese players, what's it been like over there for yourself?
I mean, it's been fun. It is, especially when you have so many players in Europe, as I said before. To have 4 at one team is incredibly is convenient for me personally. And I think that, I've obviously had some fun on Twitter this last year. We've all had some fun, I hope. And it's been great for me personally as a journalist to have all these opportunities to get to interact with you guys and to learn so much about Celtic fandom and the culture and the club. And it is great exposure for Japanese football, for the J League. I think that when a manager like Ange succeeds, when Kyogo and Daisen and Reo succeed, that is Japan's success, and that is Asia's success. And all of us who bang the drum for Asian football, we're always happy to celebrate those moments because we believe in it. We want to see Asian football get the respect and the credit it deserves. And I think that this championship is a big part of that. And it's one step that hopefully will part of many.
100%. And again, the link between Celtic and the J League, I do hope it continues. And kind of finally, Dan, a wee prediction for next season. You made many at the start of the previous season there, so what are you going to go with?
In terms of, I mean, I've made
success.
I think, oh God, it's May 15th or 2022.
The day after we lifted the league now.
The day after you lifted the trophy and you're putting me on the spot. So these are my first predictions. This is the first predictions for the 2022-2023 season that I'm gonna lead. And these are most, if not all, hot takes, but I'll do it. I will tap Celtic to defend. I think you can get to the round of 16 and then knocked out of the Champions League. And I think that at least two of the Japanese players will be named to the World Cup squad. If FIFA decides to expand the roster, which they've talked about, I think extending it from 23 to 27, there were rumors. I don't think that if that happens, I think you get 3. I think Kyogo is a lock. I think Maeda is on the good side of the bubble, and I think Hatate needs some time. I'm not totally. I wouldn't put money on Hatate making the World Cup squad right now, but I think that he'll have the opportunity. You're going to see that in June. We have 4 friendlies coming up: Paraguay, Brazil, and then Ghana and Ghana, Tunisia, and one other, and Chile in the Kirin Cup. And I think we'll play 2 of those. So 4 games in total. And Moriyasu is planning on calling up a big squad of 30 players. He's going to be doing a lot of rotation. It's going to be a lot of rotation and a lot of seeing what works and what doesn't. And he's also going to have the East Asian championships in July, but that'll be a J League squad, and so you don't have to worry about that. Nobody's getting called. Nobody. Every time there's a call up, people panic. And I'm telling you, so for June, I think that all 3 Celtic players will get called up in June, but don't worry about July because they won't be eligible. Moriyasu couldn't call them up even if he wanted to. So I think that, again, with an expanded World Cup squad, I think all 3 make it, and that's hard for Nitaguchi, but he's just not there.
Yeah, he's not quite there yet. Yeah,
if Nitaguchi has a bonkers, first few months and turns heads in the Champions League, you never know. Don't write him off completely, but just right now, I can't predict it. So those are my the 3 predictions that I will say into a camera live as we talk. And if anyone there is going to go to William Hill and put money on that, and if you win, you have to send me half. That's how this works.
Right. So we've got Defender League title. Yeah.
Yep.
And then we've got last 16 of the Champions League.
Yep.
And then 2 Japanese players are free getting called up to the World Cup squad from Celtic.
Yeah, I think those are 3 that I'm willing to say into a live mic.
What about the cup competitions?
I'm not going to get that. No, don't put that on me. No, I mean, look, cup competitions. I mean, that's such a close run thing because you have rotation.
Yeah.
You have that's a coin toss half the time. You look at Liverpool and Chelsea, yesterday. It's. And I think that the league is more important. I think the Champions League is going to be okay. Here's what I'll ask you: what would you, if I told you that? I mean, just now I've said that I'm pretty confident that Celtic can defend. If I told you that you would get to let's say at least the quarterfinals of the Champions League, but you have to settle for second domestically, do you take it?
No.
There you go.
Not a chance. Not a chance, Dan.
Okay.
I think you're right. The SPL is the bread and butter for Celtic Football Club, and in Europe, last 16 is a great shout. I think that's a great shout, and I just want to say as well, Dan, thanks for coming on to the show. I've actually really enjoyed our chat. It's flew in for a half an hour. You're right.
I told you. No, every time people say, 20 minutes, half an hour, it'll be quick, and I'm like, nah, it's But no, I love it. Honestly, it's been such a privilege to have these conversations and to be able to preach the gospel and to tell an audience that a year ago wouldn't have given me the time of day how amazing a league we have and the amazing players that we're developing. Because today, as I tweeted, is the J League's 29th birthday. The first game was May 15th, 1993. So next year is the big 30, and that's a huge deal. And I think that you can see that the league was founded to help professionalize the game, to raise the level of play, to create Japanese players who are capable of competing on a global stage. And you have Kyogo, Daisen, and Leo and Yosuke, and they have grown up their entire lives having professional football. And that's not something that the generation before them could have said. So that shows you how important the J League has been and how much potential there is to go even further. The JFA's goal is to win a World Cup by 2050. And we're still, we still haven't cracked the the quarterfinals. We haven't gotten to the last 8 yet. But if you look at these players, I think that Japan is in a tough World Cup group. Very tough. You've got Spain, Germany, and either Peru or New Zealand. But
I think with the players Japan have, it could be doable.
It is, as I've said, the deepest squad that Japan have ever had, the deepest player pool, the most talented potential roster that they could possibly have. And so if they don't make the round of 16, if they don't get to the quarterfinals, it's 100% on the coach.
Because 100%. And
when you have players like Daisen and Kyogo, it just you should be able to do that. So I hope that people enjoy, like I know we have fun, but I hope that people enjoy it. I hope that the fans out there are enjoying learning about us, and I hope they'll continue to learn about us because we have 58 clubs in the J League across 3 divisions now, and it's just more than anything, I hope you'll get a chance to come here and see it in person one day.
100%, 100%. I think
I
the
think,
likes we
hey,
have now.
I think that next year, this is based on it's sort of obvious, but I think that you will get a preseason tour in Japan. This year it just wasn't feasible because we're not open to tourism yet. But if everything works out, if Japan reopens, if the 4 have another great season, I think next year you're going to see it, and it's going to be spectacular.
100%. I agree. Again, with the links we have at the minute with the J League, why not take advantage of that and get over and for exposure for both club and the J League perspective? And Anthony Dunn, a contributor on our show, always welcome back, perhaps ahead of the World Cup. Hopefully you can, Dan.
Hopefully.
100%.
Look forward to it. Absolutely. It's going to be a tense half year for us as we get. You guys are your qualifier against Ukraine is in 2 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so what would you? I mean, for you, is it club or country? I mean, I know what the answer is going to be, but just
for me, Dan, if I'm totally honest, I'm Irish, so the whole Scotland.
Oh no, sorry. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
See, this is the problem that I always get. It's like, okay, where is because I'm going to get myself in trouble, but it's.
Go for it.
But no, I think that it's such a different dynamic among Celtic supporters because I think you do have the fans who are as much Irish as they are Scottish or both or neither. But here it is, yes, there's your club, but for Japanese fans, I think getting to the World Cup and going deep is the most important thing, or that is the goal. That is the brass ring. And so I think that when Japanese players have been called up from Celtic, there's always been a bit of dismissiveness from Celtic fans, like, oh, like we want them to play for us. And I think I understand that, but I hope everyone understands that for Japanese players to represent Japan is the ultimate. To put on that blue uniform is the big thing, and especially for those players to be able to potentially represent Japan at the World Cup.
Yeah,
playing
William is show regular of ours. He's very big on that, and he's very Scotland passionate, and he says that's the biggest kind of honour for a player in national duty. 100%, I agree with you. And Brown Warrior comes in here, Dan, to end the show on a quick note. Has he ever heard of Shinsuke Nakamura? Of course he has.
You know what? Someone was in my comments saying that Jiro Nakamura from Gamba is a player that they should be that people should be looking at. And he's pretty young. I think this is his rookie season or his second season. He's only just cracking the 11. And I'm sure that everyone would love to see another Nakamura come to Celtic. But hey, Nakamura is still kicking it. He's he's getting it done, and it's like we have players like him and Kazumura, who's 54 and playing in the JFL, which is sort of the 4th tier, and I haven't figured out what they put in the water here, but it's just the fact that the players can keep going just forever.
Yeah. It's a great lifespan, isn't it? Nakamura, he always kept himself fit. And I remember all the former players who played with him who said he was in the gym first, last, out practicing free kicks and all that type of thing. It's a testament to the way Japanese players' attitudes are. And I think that's fantastic. You can see it with Maeda, Kyogo, Hatate, and Ideguchi. But that brings us to the end of the show, Dan, again. Thanks very much for coming on. I do want to make the people in the comments aware, but we'll be back again on Tuesday with a reaction podcast to the game. The clinched the league title. We won the league there 6-0 against Motherwell. And then on Friday is our big end of season party. We'll be having drinks, beers, whatever you may want. Get them in now because it's going to be a long show. And Dan, once again, thanks for coming on, buddy.
Thanks for having me. Let's do it again before the World Cup, or let's do it again when the Champions League draw happens. And
yes, we'll do that. We'll get that in the diary, no problem. And to everyone who's watching and going to listen on Catch Up, stay well and keep safe. Hail, hail.